Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to BizFirst Review 360. The Moody's Investor Services this week said that the outlook for Sri Lanka's banking sector is negative, with the asset quality deteriorating and the economy remaining weak. Meanwhile, the Government Information Department said that the Cabinet of Ministers has approved the Global Level Tourism Development Project proposed by Minister of Tourism Development and Christian Cultural Affairs, John Amarathunga. Let's now take a look at some more headline-making business stories.
The Employees Provident Fund has been designed to protect the retired life of semi-government and private sector employees. The fund, with a membership of 2.6 million at the end of 2017, had grown to a value of 2,060 billion rupees. 95% of the fund has been invested in state securities, while the remaining 4 to 5% is invested in the stock market. The Colombo stock market recorded significant losses during the past 3-month period. A market analysis of the overall operations of the stock market shows that the all-share price index had dropped by 3.7%, while the S&P T20 index, which monitors the activities of 20 main companies, had dropped by 9.3%. During the past few weeks, foreign investors had sold off a large portion of stocks purchased in the Sri Lankan market. In just the past week alone, foreign investors had sold off shares amounting to a total of 1,372 million rupees. It was against such a backdrop that the Central Bank Governor Indrajit Kumaraswamy, speaking at the 66th anniversary of the Central Bank, said that funds of the EPF should be invested in the stock market in order to further strengthen the fund. The Auditor General has pointed out that the value of the shares purchased by the EPF in 2013 from the Information Technological Institute, that was recording losses at the time to the tune of 43.9 million rupees, by 2015 had dropped to 3.3 million rupees. The Auditor General added that although an investment of 500 million was made to purchase shares in Sri Lankan Airlines, by the 31st of December 2015, there was no turnover. In a situation where the company used to invest the money of the Mahapola Trust Fund was closed down due to the massive losses, is it not cause for concern that the funds of the EPF are to be invested in the stock market?
Analysts, politicians and civil society activists in Sri Lanka have time and time again raised concerns on Chinese projects initiated in the island, saying that the country is falling prey to a Chinese debt trap. China's Belt and Road Initiative has been the subject of concern, as a number of countries which received investment under the program have begun to grumble about falling prey to a Chinese debt trap. Chinese projects in Sri Lanka have drawn similar concerns. Last year, the strategic Hambantota port was given to the Chinese on a 99-year lease over the country's inability to repay the loans obtained for the $1.4 billion project. Speaking in defense of the multi-billion-dollar trade and infrastructure project, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said there is no such thing as debt trap for the Hambantota harbour. She quoted statistics from Sri Lanka's central bank to show that Chinese loans only amounted to around 10% of the country's foreign debt in 2017. She went on to say that therefore Sri Lanka's main debt burden is not caused by Chinese loans. However, is this statement objectively true? Are the concerns raised by a number of international countries as well as local experts merely a farce?
Now, this figure, I think, is camouflaged or might be even manipulated and does not have any merit. For instance, there is much more than that. Their presence in Sri Lanka is much more than that, and the debt component is certainly more than that. For instance, one good example is to take the Hambantota port. Recently, there was a conversion from debt to equity, right? A 1.5 billion conversion. And if Sri Lanka's total debt was in the range of 50 billion, if the 10% they're talking about is 4 billion, at the 1.5 billion, you're looking at about close to about 6 billion. So that's about a 15%. So there are much more than this which is there. So this 10% which has been mentioned by China is, I think, inaccurate.
The rupee hit a record low for a 12th straight session on Wednesday, tracking weakness in emerging market stocks and currencies, while rising demand for the greenback from importers also weighed. The rupee touched 162.25 per dollar as currencies and stocks in emerging markets were pressured on news that South Africa had slipped into recession and concerns about inflation in Turkey and the Philippines. The rupee closed at 162.20 or 162.30 per dollar, compared with Tuesday's close of 161.95 or 162.05. Speaking to media, State Minister of Finance Iran Vikramaratne said Sri Lanka will not intervene in the foreign exchange market and the government will leave the level of the rupee for market forces to decide. The currency has so far weakened 0.5% this month, following a 1.2% decline in August. It is down 5.8% this year. Dealers said the rupee will be under depreciation pressure with the year-end seasonal importer dollar demand.
Government data stated yesterday that tourist arrivals in Sri Lanka has risen to 4.9% year-on-year in August. Tourist arrivals for the first 8 months of the year rose 12.5% for the same period last year. The government slashed its prices for tourist arrivals and revenue for this year after a record 2017, citing anti-Muslim violence and an outbreak of dengue fever. Tourist arrivals rose 3.2% to 2.1 million last year. Tourism revenue rose by a similar percentage to an all-time peak of $3.63 billion.
The 7 Mountains of Influence. If you're wondering what that is, stay tuned. We will be back after this short commercial break. Welcome back. You're watching Biz First Review 360. Now, to talk to you on the 7 Mountains of Influence and how you can influence them, we've got in our studios Mr. Winfred Bauer, the CEO of Bauer Consulting International.
A very good evening and welcome to Biz First Review 360 with me, Abrar Abid. In our studio today we have Mr. Winfred Bauer, the CEO of Bauer Consulting International. Today we will be talking about leadership and a few concepts that are very beneficial to the youth of this country and to everybody, as we are a developing country. Welcome, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you about the leadership concept and the 7 Mountains of Influence concept, and if you could give us a brief introduction about these concepts.
Yes, yes. Well, leadership is needed, and it always has been needed in human history. But things are changing, so we need to be more specific who is leading what. And there's this concept of the 7 mountains, and which talk about that there are 7 mountains of influence which influence every society and every nation, if we like it or not. Okay. And we have different people who are kind of sitting or ruling from those mountains, and they are influencing how we live and how we are doing in here. So those 7 mountains are named, which is religion, family, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business. So when we have a closer look at religion, for example. Now, religion is important, and every nation, every country has some kind of a religion which is the dominant religion. And whatever we believe, of course, has an impact on our lifestyle, what our worldview, and how we are doing what we believe. So religion is important, as you know, here in Sri Lanka as well. You have multiple religions. Then we have the mountain of family. Now, family is something we forget more and more. Family is the smallest cell of society. You can see how the family is doing in how the nation is doing. And how the nation is doing, if you look into the smallest cell, how the family is doing. It's like in our body, we have the whole concept of our body in each single body cell. And this is a great concern, because there are many nations, they don't focus on family anymore, like what we've seen over here in Sri Lanka, because of the economical situation. People have to work abroad or in different areas. So a lot of children grow up without mom or dad, and so they don't have the family concept anymore. And so there's loneliness, and it comes to depression later on, all kinds of problems, because the family, this place of security, is not there anymore. Then we have the mountain of education. As we know, education is really important. Education opens the door to the world. Education opens the door to a good lifestyle, basically. And so as better the education in a nation, as better people will do and have chances for the future. Then, of course, we have government. We miss a little T here, but government, we cannot be without kind of governments. Every nation has a government, and hopefully it's a democracy, which helps a lot. But government has a strong influence on each of us, and I want to come back to this. And then we have media. That's what you guys do here. Media is important because it brings information, and it helps us to get a world view, and it gives us information. Even we may live in a remote place, have no clue what's going on. Now everybody has a TV set or a smartphone, and you can get every information you want to these days. So media is very, very powerful, and we have to make sure that we have good medias in our nations. Then we have arts and entertainment. Now arts and entertainment, a lot of people are very creative, and they don't know about it, and we enjoy it. You know, some people enjoy to go to a concert, listen to good music, or read good books, or look at pictures, go painting, whatsoever. And the entertainment part is, what do we do with our free time? You know, people are working more and more, so they come home really tired. The question is, what are you going to do with the rest of the day? And again, TV, for example, which is a big entertainment part, what are we watching? And what is it doing to us? So it can be positive, it can be negative, we don't know, but how are we spending our times, which talks a lot about our life quality and how we are doing. And then of course we have the business mountain. The business mountain, this is the area where the money is. This is where we create jobs. This will show how well is a country really doing. Now we have leaders and leaderships on each of those mountains, and doesn't matter in what nation and what culture we live, we can have a clear look and we see those mountains have an influence on what we are doing. And now media and entertainment, this specifically is molding our worldview. What do we believe? What do we see? And the problem very often is that we believe that a life in another nation is so much better. Right? And so is that really true? And we see like Hollywood movies, and it's all staged, it's all a setup, and we are watching fairy tales. It's not reality, but we see how powerful it is. The whole fashion industry goes along that, you know. Now suddenly somebody, all young men run around with beards because it's in fashion.
It's trending.
It's trending, right. And of course we get it a lot from Hollywood, from the media, what we see, how we like to be.
So what you focused on, which was the fact that a lot of the youth, a lot of people, they are set with that mindset where they think that they need to leave the country, leave Sri Lanka, go abroad, find life over there, considering the grass is always greener on the other side. What is it that you have to say about that? How can they get rid of that mindset, and why do they have to get rid of that mindset to do something for this country, as a nation, as people of this country?
Right. Usually we believe it's the government, it's the politicians who can change everything. But basically it's true, but only to a certain point. It's the people, it's the citizens who bring the real change into the world. Now we are looking at the young people, which are the next generations and the next generation of leaders. And of course in Sri Lanka, it is not easy. I mean, we've been coming here since 2001, over and over again, and we have many friends over here, so we do understand the situation a little bit. And I do understand that a lot of people think there's a better life in a different nation, and that the job market might be better, yes, and you earn more money, yes. But who is changing the nation? Who brings development? And it's basically the young people. And if they wouldn't run away, stay here and see the opportunities, and really start to love their own nation, and come with good ideas. The good thing, what I see here in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of opportunities. So if you really want to do something, you have a chance. It's a country, it's a democracy, so there is a lot of freedom. And if the young people would stand up and say, hey, we want to do something with our nation, it is possible, because it's the people of a nation who bring the change.
Sure.
And depending on what you believe and what hopes you have, you can really, over years, it's a process, it will not happen overnight, but you can really bring a change.
Right. And Mr. Bauer, finally, one last question, where in every country there is law and enforcement. There's
Yes.
a certain system. There is the nation.
Yes.
What are the loopholes that you see? What message do you have for us to
Well,
improve
Yeah.
ourselves?
Basically, I believe we need to understand that leadership basically is changing. We are used to a pyramidic or hierarchical system. There's the leader on top, and he's leading from the top down to the bottom.
Right.
So the poor people are always at the bottom, and the big guys are saying what they have to do.
Right.
True and powerful leadership now is understood that we're going to lead from the inside out.
Right.
With other words, we are motivating people around us to bring the change. So we are motivating. It's not in our hands to do everything, because we can do it everything if we are honest. The problem is a lot of people are not honest.
Right.
But if we are honest, we can do everything. But it's the multitude of people who can bring a change. So if we motivate them and give them hope
As a nation.
as a nation, and tell them, look, this is a beautiful nation. There's so many opportunities, and go for it. You know, now since the war has stopped, which is awesome, and all the tourists are coming back.
Right.
So there are great opportunities for tourism, and I think you're scratching on the surface. There's so much more, but the question is, how do you do it? You know, I think there can be more excellence in what you do, and go more into details. And some people already, what I can see, they already start to do it, but there's so much more. So the question is to have hope, and to really understand leadership will change. The old structures will not last anymore, because we can see it after country after country after country. Things are changing here, because things are far more effective if we motivate people and say, you have the guts, you have the power, you have the vision, you have the idea, you go and do it, and we help you. We help you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Bauer, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you. That is all we have.
Stay tuned. We will be back after this short commercial break. Welcome back. This is Biz First Review 360. Now, News First's Nadim Majid caught up with Subhashini Abesinghe, her research director at Verite Research, on Sri Lanka's tax exemption scheme.
We're in conversation with Subhashini Abesinghe, her research director at Verite Research. Subhashini, I'm about to move on to your pet area, where I expect that you will be in your element, trade. The introduction of free trade agreements, that the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement for one, and now the government, the trade agreements that are in the pipeline, including with EDCA and the proposed FTA with China as well. Do you feel that the introduction of these bilateral trade agreements will help the regulatory process, will help sort of mitigate the weaknesses that you have identified in, for example, import tax exemption schemes?
So one of the why we require import tax exemption schemes in the first place is because we have import taxes. So if you don't, for example, if I can, why can't the government simply say all greenhouses imported into the country are duty free? One would assume why do you require someone to take a recommendation letter from Ministry of Agriculture? But when you look at the technical side of it, you understand greenhouses do not come in one. Greenhouses contain actually lot of material that are under import duty. For example, you can bundle polythene, tubes, various other nuts and bolts that form a part of this greenhouse, and you can actually import other stuff saying that this is a greenhouse, because customs is not going to dismantle it and erect a greenhouse in customs to check whether this is actually a greenhouse, right? So that is exactly the reason that you actually require a recommendation letter of misuse, because of, it can be misused. So all the requirements of recommendations letters and all these approvals become redundant if we don't have to pay import taxes at the point of import. So it is what free trade agreements to some extent try to do, is remove these taxes, but then this is done on a bilateral basis for individual countries, right? So it's not going to again take away the problem of people wanting to use these tax exemption schemes to evade taxes, because it's not, we economists call this unilateral liberalization. It is not a unilateral liberalization. And that still creates room for people. If I'm importing from any other country other than these countries, I would still have to follow this process of getting recommendation letters and approvals.
Given what we were talking about during the previous segment of the program about the resistance that anyone who wants to sort of change or reform this process will come across, is there a sort of a logical common sense pathway through which these reforms can be achieved, or is it just a matter of you need to have the will?
Yes, so actually I'm sure you would have discussed in your program these massive projects like single window, where all border procedures, so any importer and exporter has to deal with maybe 30 different agencies at various stages to get various approvals. So you basically automate all of them and link all of them, so that prevents you from having to physically go to places or physically carry documents. So these kind of projects, actually not just in Sri Lanka, in every country, if you read the literature, is faced with significant resistance. And you actually use the right word. It has been the political will at the highest level in countries like Malaysia and other places. They're saying the Prime Minister, the President made this a priority project because they realized this is critical for their export success in the world. And they drove this project and made sure everyone fell in line. And what we've seen is, what I have been frequently saying is, unfortunately in Sri Lanka, these kind of projects have become the responsibility of a single line agency or a line ministry, which sometimes do not necessarily have the incentive or motivation to see it through, because they are the ones who are going to lose from having the systems in place. So that is why, despite speaking about automating border agencies and streamlining the processes for decades, Sri Lanka has made very poor progress in comparison to most other countries in the region.
If you take, for example, if you take even at the BOI, at the Information and Communication Technology, at ICTA as well, you have individual officials who are pushing for this. But do you feel that that level of enthusiasm is absent in the political leadership, specifically, as you mentioned, at the highest levels, the Prime Minister, the President?
So that what we have seen is, I mean, they seem interested, but I don't think they realize that this cannot be delivered by few officers or even one or two agencies, that this has to be a national initiative. Because when you're talking about even Board of Investment or export and import, what we are talking about multiple agencies falling under multiple ministries. So if I'm, for example, if I'm Board of Investment, my ministry is Ministry of International Trade, but for this process to happen, to be streamlined, I need Environment Ministry support, I need Ministry of Industry and Commerce support, I need even the Provincial Council support, but Board of Investment does not necessarily have the authority to demand or to give instructions that you need to follow or reform your processes. So especially in projects like this, where you have to make sure 15 different ministries all think alike, it has to be driven at a Prime Minister or at the level of the Prime Minister or the President for it to really deliver.
Thank you again for coming on the program.
Up next is our special segment, Speak Your Mind. Joining us this evening is Paula Albonazzo from France. She's a representative of a family that has been in the tea business for 3 consecutive generations. A very good evening, Paula.
Good evening, everybody.
Paula, first things first, I'd like to ask you, how has your stay been here in Sri Lanka?
My staying in Sri Lanka is absolutely magnificent. I am enjoying so much everything in Sri Lanka. I visited many places and the experience is really very nice. I can tell you that I had a very interesting experience. I visited 2 days ago during the celebrations the very nice temple in Kandy. And I had the privilege, thankful to our friend Mr. Kelly Rajamadhendran, the tooth of Lord Buddha, and I understand that it is something spiritually very important, and I will bring this experience with me when I will go back at home.
Yes, that's definitely an experience to take back home, Paula. Now, as a person who has been in the tea industry for 3 generations, what do you personally feel about tea?
I feel that the consumption of tea is very much improving in the world. Everybody nowadays know how important are the properties of the tea for our health. We know that it is an antioxidant, that it is energizing very much for our health, and also the consumption of tea is a celebration of a special moment to share with our dearest, or to have by ourselves a break during the day, a moment for us, and it is also very good for our health.
So, Paula, tell me, you've been here in Sri Lanka for some time now, and you've visited a number of tea factories here in Sri Lanka. What do you feel about Sri Lankan tea?
I think that the Sri Lankan tea is the best tea in the world. It is a very good product, and the tea estates are so beautiful, and they represent so much for Sri Lanka, and people take care so nicely of these tea estates that it is really a beautiful world on all the aspects of tea business.
So Paula, tell me finally a little bit of a technical question. With the current global trends and in the global market, of course, what do you feel about the demand for tea in the global market?
The demand for tea in the global market is growing very much. Absolutely.
It's growing.
Yes.
And What do you feel about Sri Lankan tea that is in the global market? What do you feel that the consumers in the global market have trust in Sri Lankan tea?
Of course, for many reasons. First of all, because it is a very good production. Then also because all the process that is applied on the tea work in Sri Lanka is very carefully done, more than in other countries that I can visited.
Thank you very much, Paula Albanazzo from France, for joining us on BizFirst Review 360 this evening. And that's all the news we've got for you tonight. To follow details of these stories, you can of course look us up on Facebook by typing BizFirst Review 360. Good night and have a pleasant weekend.